Hey there, guys. This is Cole. Welcome back to another movie review. Um, Here today on Halloween Horror Movie Reviews, Season 1, Episode 24, I will be covering the 1978 slasher classic film, Halloween, directed by John Carpenter, starring Jamie Lee Curtis. And Halloween is one of the most well-known, recognized horror films of all time. It was so popular that it kicked off a 13-film franchise. I don't know if I'm gonna review, and I don't know if I'm gonna review the second movie this October because there's a bunch of stuff I'd like to review, but I'll at least review the first one. Although I do quite like the second movie as well. But yeah, anyways, what is the plot to the 1978 movie Halloween? Well, the plot of this movie is as follows. On a cold Halloween night in 1963, 6-year-old Michael Myers brutally murdered his 17-year-old sister Judith. He is sentenced and locked away for 15 years. But on October 30th, 1978, while being transferred for a court date, 21-year-old Michael Myers steals a car and escapes Smith's Grove. He returns to his quiet hometown of Haddonfield, Illinois, where he looks for his next victim. So that's basically the simple plot synopsis to the movie. And I mean, at this rate, Halloween, I mean, when it comes to this movie, I mean, what more can I say about this movie that hasn't already been said by many people? It's a definite classic for sure. One of the best slasher movies, no doubt about it. And there is still a reason that this movie is talked to this day, 47 years later. But anyway, so let's get into the review. Now, before I get into my review of the movie itself, I kind of want to go over some interesting trivia on how this movie came to be made. So, anyways, how was this movie made? Well, after John Carpenter had a huge success directing Assault on Precinct 13 from 1976, which is a beloved classic action movie, which I do like that movie. So, like I said, after he had a huge success directing the original Assault on Precinct 13 from 1976, he decided to branch out and direct a horror movie set on Halloween, as John Carpenter is a fan of the holiday Halloween. The movie was originally going to be titled The Babysitter Murders, but then John Carpenter decided to change the title to Halloween as he thought that was a much better title, which I agree with. Production for the movie began on April 24th, 1978, with principal photography taking place over 20 days in May of 1978. The film was shot in Southern California on a very low budget of $325,000, with a total production time of just over a month before its release in October of the same year. When the movie was released on October 25th, 1978, it received positive reviews from critics and audiences and was a smash hit at the box office, making $70 million worldwide on a $325,000 budget. This movie's success is really what put John Carpenter on the map as a director, but it also spawned a really large franchise of 13 movies, and Halloween to this day, when it comes to this movie, Halloween 1978 to this day is widely regarded as one of the best horror movies of all time by both critics and audiences. As for my reaction to this movie, I first saw this movie in 2018 when I rented it on Prime Video, and I really liked it then, and, I've watched it a few times over the years, and, rewatching it again last night for, maybe, the 10th time, I wouldn't necessarily say 10th time, I've seen it at least 5 times, but rewatching it again last night, I still really like this movie. This movie is definitely a classic, and it's definitely worthy of its classic status it has. So without further ado, let's get into my review on this movie. One thing I do really like about the movie is the music, especially the music at the beginning of the movie, which I'm not gonna play the music because I don't want this video to get a copyright strike, but it's very well done, iconic music. And then, while this happens, while the music is playing, we basically see the logo Halloween with like a jack-o'-lantern. And then we then cut to this scene where the movie starts off on Halloween night in 1963, where we are introduced to 6-year-old Michael Myers. And in this scene, we see it through Michael's point of view, where he wears a clown mask and is responsible for the death of his 17-year-old sister Judith by attacking her with a knife. And I will say that is a very intense, well done scene to start off this movie. Michael Myers then walks outside, and then the parents basically drive home, and they basically unmask Michael. And the dad says Michael in like a concerned tone, and then the camera shuts to 6-year-old Michael Myers holding a knife, and then the parents just staring at him. Rather intense opening scene. We then cut to Smith's Grove, Illinois on October 30th, 1978, where a car is being driven and we are introduced to Dr. Loomis, played by Donald Pleasence, who is the passenger in the car. And before I continue the review, I gotta say, I really like Donald Pleasence as an actor, In fact, this movie was such a well-received, critically acclaimed film that, after this movie, Donald Pleasence, he would work with John Carpenter on another movie called Escape from New York, which is a great action movie from the 1980s starring Kurt Russell, but I'll review that someday. But anyways, getting back to this review, Dr. Loomis basically asked the car driver, but because Dr. Loomis is the passenger in the car, he basically asked the car driver, have you ever done anything like this before? As it's raining outside. And the driver basically says, only minimal security. But then Dr. Loomis then says, the driveway is a few hundred yards up on the right. The driver stops the car as she sees patients from an asylum wandering outside in the grass as it's raining out. Dr. Loomis then tells the driver to pull up to the main gate. Dr. Loomis gets out of the car to, like I said, and then, Dr. Loomis, he gets out the car to open up the main gate. While this is going on, Michael Myers runs on top of the car. The driver rolls the window down, and Michael Myers grabs the driver, making her struggle and choke and stuff like that. And then the driver starts accidentally driving. She then gets her hand off. She then gets the hand off of her and, stops the car. And then Michael Myers smashes the window on the other side, making her jump out of the car. And then Michael Myers steals the car and drives off. And Dr. Loomis is basically asking the driver if she's okay and stuff like that, which she is. We then cut to daytime in Haddonfield, Illinois, where we are introduced to our main character of the movie, Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis in her very first film role, actually. And I gotta say, I thought that Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, was a great, likable character. And in this movie, Laurie Strode, and we basically learn in the movie that Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, is a babysitter who has to babysit a brother and a sister. And one thing I will say about this movie's got a really good stacked cast. You got Nick Castle, the actor playing the bad guy, Michael Myers, who, interesting fact, after this movie, he did not star in it, but Nick Castle, who played Michael Myers in this movie, he would actually go on to direct the 1995 family comedy movie Major Payne with Damon Wayans, which I absolutely love that movie. But, But yeah, like I said, you got Michael Myers, you got Nick Castle as Michael Myers, you got Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie Strode, you got Donald Pleasance as Dr. Loomis, you got PJ Souls as Linda, you got Don Michael as Bob Simmons, you got Nancy Kyes as Andy, and Charles Cypher as the sheriff. So really good stacked cast. Getting back to the review, the whole scene early on in the movie where Laurie is walking to school. Now, we do not see the face, but we do see the body of the killer, Michael Myers, standing facing Laurie. And, Laurie's walking away, but Michael Myers is just staring at her. And we don't see Michael Myers' face or mask, but we hear his deep breathing, which is a rather effective scene. Then early on in the movie, Laurie is in the high school classroom. She looks outside the window and she sees the killer, Michael Myers, with the white mask staring at her in the window. But then the teacher calls Laurie's name to answer a question. Laurie answers the question, and then as soon as Laurie is done answering the question and then she looks back at the window, she sees that both Michael Myers and the car that was by him are gone. And the killer, Michael Myers, he drives the car, following the kid that Laurie has to babysit with the car he's driving. Then we cut to a scene where Dr. Loomis is on the phone, basically warning the cops about Michael Myers and that Michael Myers is in Haddonfield and that he must be stopped. And then he says, all right, but if you don't listen to me and, it's your funeral. Later that day, Laurie Strode and her friend Linda are walking home from school alongside their friends. And then Laurie realizes she forgot her chemistry book. While Andy, which is one of her friends, is talking, Laurie sees a car drive by. The exact one she saw at the school where Michael Myers was watching her. And she just gets a suspicious feeling about the car. I also like the scene where Laurie and Andy where Laurie Strode and Andy are walking home, and Laurie sees Michael Myers standing out in front of them. Then Michael Myers goes behind a tall bush out of sight, and Laurie points it out to Andy. So Andy, she decides to walk up to the bush to confront the guy, but she sees that Michael Myers is not there, and she calls Laurie, and she basically calls Laurie over. Then Andy says to her that, she's wacko, and she thinks that Laurie is starting to see things that aren't actually there. Laurie then gets home and sees that Michael Myers is standing in her backyard. Then Laurie gets a phone call by Annie saying that her mom will get her at 6:30 p.m. Later that day, Dr. Loomis finds out that Judith Myers' grave was dug out and the body was stolen by, of course, Michael Myers, who was responsible for, Judith's death at the beginning of the film. And Dr. Loomis says, "He came home." Very iconic quote. Laurie is then on a car ride in Andy's car, and Andy stops the car and sees that her dad, Sheriff Lee Brackett, is at the Halloween store, and Andy's dad basically says, some stuff was stolen, probably by some kids, a mask, a rope, and some knives. And, so yeah. And then Laurie and Andy drive the car away. Later that night, we learn Dr. Loomis's backstory with Michael Myers, as he describes it to the sheriff in these exact words. "I met him 15 years ago. I was told it was nothing left. No reason, no conscience, no understanding, even the most rudimentary sense, life or death of good or evil, right or wrong. I met this 6-year-old child with a blank, pale, emotionless face, and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up, because I realized what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely, simply evil. The sheriff basically then asks, what do we do? And then Dr. Loomis says, he's been here once tonight. I think he'll come back. I am going to wait for him. And the sheriff says no at first, but then Dr. Loomis is able to convince the sheriff, and so the sheriff says, I'll be back to check on you in an hour. We then cut to Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, who is babysitting Tommy Doyle, the kid that she has to babysit. Meanwhile, Laurie's friend Andy is babysitting Lindsay Wallace, who is across the street. Tommy basically asks Laurie, what's the boogeyman? Laurie is on the phone, and while this is going on, Laurie is on the phone talking to someone, and Tommy says, the boogeyman is outside, but, when Laurie looks, Michael isn't there, and Laurie, and then, Tommy's like, are you gonna protect me? And then Laurie promises that she will not let anything happen to Tommy. Later that night, before Annie can drive the car out to the garage, Michael Myers strangles her and then cuts her throat, ending her, and her head falls on the steering wheel. Tommy notices from his window Michael Myers is carrying Annie's body and is screaming, freaking out. Laurie tells him to stop scaring Lindsay. Later that night, Bob hooks up with Linda and is making out on the couch, but little do they know Michael Myers is watching both of them. And later that night, Bob is in the kitchen getting a beer for him and Linda. Michael Myers attacks Bob, lifting him in the air off the ground, pinning him against the cabinets, and then uses a knife to pin Bob on the wall. And Bob ends up being one of Michael's victims. And I will say, that scene right there is a very intense scene. Then Michael Myers is staring at Linda while he is wearing a bedsheet, and Linda thinks that it is Bob just screwing around. So Linda decides to give Laurie a call on the phone, and before she can finish talking, she is being choked to death by Michael Myers, and based on what Laurie's hearing from the other line, she thinks that she is screwing around with Bob, and she said, quit fooling around, you two. But then she can tell, based on the house next door and the lights and stuff, that something is definitely off. I mean, of course, there's the whole iconic scene with Michael Myers holding the telephone in complete silence. Rather well done scene, mainly due to the music and the atmosphere. Laurie then goes next door and finds the tombstone of Judith Myers, and Bob and Linda, she finds out that Bob and Linda were not so lucky that they were victims of Michael Myers, and she finds out that the tombstone of Judith Myers was desecrated and put on the bed. So then, Michael Myers attacks Laurie, making her fall downstairs in a rather well done scene. She then runs outside shouting, help me please, getting the neighbors' attention. She then gets to Tommy's house, but since the door is locked, Tommy opens the door when Laurie is shouting for him. She's basically shouting, Tommy, help me please, in a rather well done intense scene where Michael Myers is, walking to her slowly, trying to creep up on her. Very well done intense scene, mainly due to the music and just the overall presence of Michael Myers. But then there's the whole scene where Laurie is inside the house and Michael Myers breaks through the window, but Laurie Strode stabs Michael in the neck with a knife, making Michael fall over. And then, Laurie goes upstairs with the two kids, and Michael Myers shows up, freaking out the kids, and then Laurie says, quick, go hide and stuff like that. And then of course there's the whole scene where the whole iconic scene where Laurie she hides in a closet that's locked, And then, of course, there's the whole iconic scene where Michael Myers busts down the closet door and turns on the light. So then Laurie stabs Michael in the eye with a clothes hanger, which I'm like, ooh, that must have hurt. And then Laurie tells Tommy to run out the house and get to the police as soon as, get to the police to basically warn them that, the bad guy's here and that they need to take care of it. And I gotta say, I love the finale of this movie where Dr. Loomis is shooting at Michael Myers until Michael Myers falls off the balcony. Then Laurie says, "What's the boogeyman?" And then, was that the boogeyman? And Dr. Loomis then says, "As a matter of fact, it was." Then Dr. Loomis looks back at the same spot that Michael Myers was in, and then he sees that Michael Myers was gone. The movie then ends where we don't see Michael Myers, but we hear him breathing everywhere. So yeah, at the end of the day, Halloween from 1978, directed by John Carpenter, is a fantastic movie. Definitely one of my favorite horror movies to watch around October time, and easily the best movie in the franchise. Now, I do really like Halloween 2. I think that is a really good sequel, but I'll cover that movie when I get to it, but there's some other stuff I want to cover first. But yeah, at the end of the day, this was a great movie, and I'm going to give Halloween a 9 out of 10. There we go, guys. That was my review on Halloween 1978, and next up, I will be covering Night of the Living Dead from 1968. But yeah, we'll catch you guys later. Bye-bye now.